Hi, it's Katrina. I've got a lot of surprises for you today. Let's see if you can help me solve the shocking mystery of a strange, out-of-place artifact, a lost city, and other discoveries that could change history. If that sounds good, be sure to subscribe and let's go. Ancient drill bit. Modern humans appeared sometime between 300,000 and 200,000 years ago. People lived in caves until around 10,000 years ago. Our human relatives only started figuring out complex machinery during the Industrial Revolution. So then, I have to ask, why was an iron instrument found in a seam of coal hundreds of millions of years old? When the Society of Antiquaries of Scotland met to discuss business in 1852, John Buchanan came to them with an incredible bit of information. He had been made aware of a mysterious iron tool found in a seam of coal by miners near Glasgow, Scotland. The mysterious instrument was buried deep underneath diluvium clay, underneath boulders more than 7 feet thick. There was no way the tool could have accidentally slipped that deep into the earth and then magically wrapped itself in a coal seam. If it didn't get there by magic, how did it get there? At the meeting of antiquaries, the scientists offered their own versions of what could have happened. Some thought the tool was modern, broken off a drill during coal prospecting. But Buchanan refuted this hypothesis, saying the tool was completely enclosed inside an unbroken shell of coal. Another hypothesis was that the artifact was left behind by an ancient civilization, one that existed long before human beings ever evolved. This piece of metal could be from an ancient mining operation. It could be a dislodged piece of an alien ship. The only thing that's for sure is that it doesn't belong here. How do you think the tool got stuck inside the coal? I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. The sunken lost city of Cuba. Off the coast of Cuba, a Canadian research company reported the discovery of a lost city. Found 24 years ago, 2,000 feet beneath the surface of the ocean, this discovery has raised more questions than answers. Is it really a city? Is it possible that it could be the legendary lost city of Atlantis? In the year 2000, Advanced Digital Communications surveyed the waters off the tip of a peninsula. Their sonar equipment identified some strange structures sprawled across the ocean floor. It looked eerily like the layout of a city. Only this didn't make any sense. Even keeping in mind any potential flood that happened in the past, this city is way too deep. It's 2,000 feet below the surface. There's just no way there could be a city at such a crazy depth. At the same time, there was no denying the sonar equipment. The strange features were organized symmetrically, looking like a city divided by streets and avenues. In 2001, marine engineer Pauline Zalitsky and her husband Paul visited the site with an underwater robot. They sent the robot down into the dark depths, eager to see what it would pick up on its cameras. The images captured sent chills up their spines. The robot filmed blocks of what looked like smooth, cut granite. Some of the blocks measured 8 by 10 feet, looking like they had just come from a quarry. Some were stacked on top of each other, looking like primitive pyramids. Other blocks were circular, almost like the ruins of pillars or shrines. Everywhere were what appeared to be the ruined foundations of houses and other buildings. The footage suggested a city, but nobody wanted to believe it. Pauline's initial estimate was that the buildings were 6,000 years old, predating the pyramids of Egypt by 1,500 years. Pauline also suggested that the city was initially on dry land. Obviously, it wasn't built by mermaids. And while that should be impossible, maybe the city fell into the sea due to an intense volcanic event. The world can be a tricky place. During an interview with the South Florida Sun-Sentinel in 2002, Pauline said this: "The structures we found on the side-scan sonar simply are not explicable from a geological point of view. There is too much organization, too much symmetry, too much repetition of form." Paul and Pauline were convinced this was a real discovery of a real sunken city off the coast of Cuba. They thought it looked like a huge urban center. This all happened almost 25 years ago. Where is National Geographic? Where are the archaeologists? Why isn't there more info on the sunken city? Here's what happened. Official scientists started dismissing the discovery as nonsense. For example, let's take a look at Manuel Iturralde from the Natural History Museum in Cuba. He said that the depths at which the structures were found posed too many problems for a lost city theory. By his calculations, it would have taken 50,000 years for a city to sink this deep. Another guy who shared his doubts was Michael Thought with Florida State University. He told the South Florida Sun-Sentinel that it would be cool if Pauline and Paul were right, but the structures are too out of time and too out of place. Did you know the ancient Maya had a legend very similar to the Greek myth of Atlantis? The ancient Maya spoke of a mysterious island inhabited by their ancestors. One day, out of the blue, the island disappeared, vanished completely beneath the waves. Could the sunken city of Cuba be that island? Why haven't we had any updates in the past 20 years? Let me know what you make of this discovery in the comments. Greek visitors to South America? Dr. Enrico Matjevich has connected an ancient Greek myth to a potential discovery of the Amazon in ancient times. He's suggesting the Greeks reached South America long before Magellan and sailed up the Amazon River. Enrico is a retired professor of physics from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. He wrote a whole book on Greek myths being connected to South American sites. But let's stick with Cadmus and the Amazon River for now. Cadmus was the son of a Phoenician king named Agenor. His sister was Europa, who was kidnapped by Zeus on one fine day while minding her own business. Zeus had a bad habit of kidnapping mortal women and impregnating them. Just about every Greek myth involves Zeus's inability to keep it in his tunic. Cadmus tried to find his sister but was unsuccessful. He consulted the Oracle of Delphi, who told him to abandon his quest. He was instead told to find a cow that bore a half moon on its side, follow it, and then build a town on the spot where the cow laid. That town became the legendary Thebes. Later on, Cadmus got into a fight with a dragon-like serpent, which he destroyed. He ended up marrying Harmonia, a mighty goddess. They had a bunch of kids, lived a happy life, and nobody ever saved Europa. In fact, she kind of vanished from his myth altogether. Unbeknownst to Cadmus, Zeus had taken his sister to an island and left her there. But Zeus sometimes went back so that Europa could bear his sons, one of them being the famous King Minos of Crete. She was essentially made into a baby-making machine for Zeus. Cadmus' story ended when he abandoned Thebes with his wife, and the couple transformed themselves into serpents. They spent the rest of their existence as snakes. It's a really weird ending to a really weird story. Now let's get back to Enrico and his bizarre theory. He recently claimed that the whole tale of Cadmus and his fight with the dragon serpent is allegory for the Greeks discovering the Amazon River. Enrico came to this conclusion by meticulously going over the old mythical texts. He found passages that describe Cadmus' dragon foe as being serpentine like a river, and other passages that say things like, carried forward in a mighty rush. Enrico admitted that the allegory is poetically creative. However, he said it's definitely talking about the Amazon rainforest. So what about physical proof? Sadly, there isn't much. All Enrico really has is a bizarre interpretation of an ancient myth. Could it be possible that the Greeks were in the Amazon rainforest 2,500 years ago? In 1969, Dr. Thor Heyerdahl built a boat using papyrus in the exact style of ancient Egyptian boats. He sailed it from Morocco to Barbados, not once, but twice. This proved beyond any doubt that ancient boats could have sailed to the Americas. Still, there isn't any physical evidence that the Greeks found the Amazon River first. There aren't any ruins, there are no pieces of pottery, there is only myth. The Volcano Pyramid of Peru. El Volcán looks like a volcano, but is it? I'm going to show you an image right now, and I want you to see if you can tell the difference between the two. On the left side of the image is the Andawa Valley Cinder Cone. On the right side of the image is El Volcán Pyramid. Don't they look jarringly similar? They both look like perfectly natural volcanoes. Only El Volcán doesn't spit fire and never has. It's a pyramid that was built by human hands in the days of antiquity. The images I showed you are from Robert Benfer, a professor at the University of Missouri. He deals in biological anthropology and has a certain obsession with mounds, the kind made of dirt. In the past, Robert has discovered dirt mounds made in the shapes of orcas, condors, and other Andean animals in Peru's coastal valleys. He was looking for more of these types of earthworks when he came across El Volcán. Robert and his team climbed El Volcán and began a full archaeological investigation. They dug a trench inside the inner crater, which looks like it should be filled with bubbling hot lava. What they found instead was a collapsed stairwell leading underneath a thick layer of adobe bricks. It looked like Robert had just found a city buried inside this pyramid-shaped volcano mound. At the bottom of the stairwell was a smooth floor made of mud plaster and a fireplace. The fireplace was full of bits of charcoal. The organic material allowed scientists to pinpoint the last time a fire had burned in the fireplace. It was between 1492 and 1602, during the days of the Inca. It was the time of the Inca Empire, but this site didn't belong to them. El Volcán stands in the old homeland of the Yungas. The Yungas was a completely unique society separate from the Inca. You can Google them, but you're not going to find very much. The Yungas is a region of subtropical forests along the edge of the Andes in Peru, Bolivia, and Argentina. Nobody knows the actual name of all of the ancient cultures who lived in the region, so often they are just referred to as the Yungas culture. The huge volcano-shaped mound was likely built around 900 BC, though maybe a little later. Archaeologists haven't been able to agree on what the purpose of the mound was. There are no real volcanoes in the area to serve as inspiration for its construction, yet there is no doubt it was meant to be a mimic of a volcano. One thing researchers realized during the dating process is that El Volcán was built during an era of frequent solar eclipses. In 1521, 1538, 1539, and 1543, there were solar eclipses. This is incredibly rare. The chance of 4 solar eclipses happening back-to-back during the construction of the mound is about 0.0003%. It could be that the Yungas saw these solar eclipses as a sign. But as with the rest of the mysteries in today's video, this one remains unsolved. The Mystery of Norune. There is a prehistoric site in Turkey with a very mysterious history. No, it's not the famous Göbekli Tepe, for once. I'm talking about Norune, a humongous mound rising almost 100 feet tall and an incredible 1,500 feet long. The discovery of Norune dates back to 1968. A team of researchers from the German Archaeological Institute excavated the mound, which you can see here in this old aerial photograph. The archaeologists didn't have much time though. The Cuba Dam was being constructed and the water level was about to rise. They had to finish their field work by the year 1974. During those 6 years of research, the German scientists found an incredible mystery. They excavated an estimated 40 layers of settlements going back to at least 7,000 years ago. However, keep in mind their dating was done 50 years ago, meaning it might not have been accurate. These layers could go back much further in time. But what do I mean about layers of settlements? Each settlement was built on the ruins of an even older one. So many towns were built one upon the other that the mound has evidence of each of them in a thin layer. It's like looking at the sediment lines of the Grand Canyon, each one corresponding to its own time period. Only the lines at Norune reveal a long and complex history dating to the Stone Age. Archaeologists believe Norune was one of the most important sites in ancient Turkey. People were living in mud brick buildings here during the Stone Age, then the Copper Age, through all of the stages of the Bronze Age, and into the Iron Age. It appears to have been abandoned for unknown reasons around 2000 BC. Unfortunately, the whole place is currently underwater. This is a photograph of Norune after 1974, when the Cuba Dam was completed. Norune is now at the bottom of an artificial lake. Almost right next door to the sunken city of Norune is the ruin of Göbekli Tepe, which is wildly famous for being the oldest temple in the world at 12,000 years old. It's possible the two sites are linked, though archaeologists haven't found any proof. Proof is hard to find when the place you're trying to study is at the bottom of a reservoir. And now for a quick break because it's shoutout time. I want to give a huge thank you to Ian Redden for the super thanks. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. Biblical giants in northern Israel. New evidence has come to light that the biblical Nephilim were real and that the banned Book of Enoch is a historical fact. You might be a true believer by the end of the next 5 minutes. The Book of Enoch is an ancient apocryphal text written around the 2nd century BC, supposedly authored by Noah's great-grandfather. I won't get into the specific details of the book, though I do wish I had time because the book is pretty wild. To learn more about it, you'll need to check out the other religious videos on the channel, revealing shocking truths about the Bible and its secret books. What I will say is that the Book of Enoch claims when God banished the Nephilim, they were sent to Mount Hermon. This is a real place in Israel, its name meaning to be banished. Mount Hermon is in the region of Bashan, the same place where the Bible says King Og came from when he fought the Israelites after the Exodus, when they entered the Promised Land. King Og was said to be a giant, just like Goliath. It's believed that when the Israelites entered the Promised Land, it was still occupied by descendants of the Nephilim, known as the Rephaim. I know I'm throwing a lot of names at you and it can get a little confusing. Essentially, this whole region of Israel was supposedly occupied by giants. How is that possible? Because Og remained alive by clinging to the side of the ark. He was a stowaway, hanging on to the planks of wood until the floodwaters went away, and Noah was able to land the boat. Og is even named in Deuteronomy as the only surviving Rephaim. The Bible says he stood around 14 feet tall. King Og presumably made more children in the centuries after Noah landed the ark, but his kids weren't as big. Whatever made the Nephilim and the Rephaim humongous was starting to seep out of the bloodline. King Og's children were likely closer to 9 feet tall, maybe 8 feet tall, which is still pretty tall. When the Israelites arrived in King Og's lands, they destroyed the remaining giants. By the days of King David, the only people who still had even a bit of giant's blood were people like Goliath of the Philistines, who stood maybe 6 or 7 feet tall. This brings me to the new piece of evidence I promised you, a place called Gilgal Rephaim in Golan Heights. In English, it's called Wheel of the Giants. This mysterious place is an unusual rock formation that from the ground doesn't look like much. From the air, though, it looks like a labyrinth. An impressive series of circles made from thousands of small stones. There are 5 concentric rings, the outermost ring 500 feet wide. This rock formation is enormous. At the very center of the labyrinth is a mound of loose stones 16 feet tall and 65 feet in diameter. Archaeologists are pretty certain that it's a grave, one that was made 5,500 years ago. Nobody has ever been able to confirm the purpose of the central mound. They don't know what the Wheel of the Giants was used for at all, but there are theories. The most popular theory, and the one I'm here to tell you about today, involves King Og. It's been said that when the final king of the giants, the very last leader with Nephilim blood, was slain by the Israelites, he was buried here. It's an exciting theory, and all the links are there to make it feel real. The only thing that's missing is the king himself. Nobody has ever been able to find Og's bones to prove that he was buried at the heart of this ancient labyrinth. The aliens of Giant Rock. Giant Rock is exactly what it sounds like. It's a giant rock, a thing that doesn't look particularly out of the ordinary because, well, it's a rock. But it's not the looks that matter in this case, it's the history. Giant Rock has been attracting spiritualists, curious engineers, and believers in aliens for decades. No, for centuries. Giant Rock is in the Mojave Desert of California, standing an astonishing 7 stories high. This is the biggest boulder you're ever going to lay eyes on. It covers nearly 6,000 square feet of surface space. Although not confirmed, many believe it to be the largest freestanding rock anywhere on the planet. Okay, it's big, but it's still just a rock, right? Not to the Native Americans. For them, it was a spiritual site used by various tribes going back thousands of years, to a time that nobody even remembers anymore. There is no possible way to figure out when the first natives used the rocks as a religious shrine. In recorded history, European settlers became interested in the rock in the 1930s. A German immigrant named Frank Kritzer bought some mining equipment and carved a home for himself directly beneath the rock. He must have been related to a trapdoor spider or something. Everybody thought he was crazy, but he was also a little loose with his shotgun, so people tended to leave him alone. Frank installed a huge radio antenna at the top of the rock to give his radio the best reception. Things were going well for him until World War II, when his huge German radio antenna led to locals accusing him of being a spy. The police raided his cavern, and Frank ended up dying under mysterious circumstances. I won't point any fingers, but I will say he was alive prior to the raid. The police later learned that Frank was not a spy. He only wanted to live a quiet life, literally, under a rock. Is that so much to ask? Frank may have been a hermit, but he wasn't without his friends. When George Van Tassel learned of Frank's passing, he started holding meditation sessions in Frank's old cave home. It was during this time, in the early 1950s, that George started receiving transmissions from aliens. George descended into alien madness. He claimed that he had been transported to an alien ship where he met a group of extraterrestrials known as the Council of Seven Lights. He was inspired to construct a rejuvenation machine, something he called the Integratron. Over the next 34 years, George held UFO conventions at Giant Rock while he raised money to build his rejuvenation machine. It was a huge domed structure that, when it was finished, would be able to collect 50,000 volts of static electricity from the air. All that static electricity could then be used to charge the human body. Charge it to do what, though? George's machine was never finished, so no human was ever charged with 50,000 volts of static energy to see what happened. George had a heart attack, and somebody tried to turn his machine into a disco. Now it's a sound bath meditation retreat. George had also said it would have anti-gravity powers and allow time travel. This has already been such a wild ride that you're likely wondering where it could go from here. I need to tell you about how Giant Rock predicts the future. In the 1920s, Hopi shamans claimed Giant Rock would crack, and based on that crack would reveal the future. The crack came 80 years later in February 2000. A huge piece broke off the rock. Spiritual leader Sri Nath Devi traveled to the site and interpreted the break. The leader said it was a good sign of things to come, but didn't give any specific details about the future. Dangun, the Immortal God Emperor of Korea. I feel like we don't hear enough about ancient Korea. There is a lot of talk about Egypt, Mesopotamia, Mesoamerica, but very little Korean history. So I'd like to introduce you to the mystery of Dangun Wangum, founder of the First Kingdom of Korea and grandson of God. The origin of the Korean people is shrouded in myth and legend, many of which are unknown to the outside world. A belief still held by many is that the Korean people descended from the Lord of Heaven. The Lord of Heaven was Hwanin, believed to be the very real ruler of all the heavens and the sky. His son, Hwanong, wished to rule the earth. Hwanong was always looking down at it from the heavens, yearning for the strange little world below. He asked for his father's permission to rule earth, and the Lord of Heaven said yes. Hwanong brought 3,000 of his loyal followers to the earth. His followers were gods of wind, clouds, rain, etc. They landed on Mount Taibak and established the city of Sinsi. From their city on the mountain, the gods ruled the people of the world. Unlike so many gods of ancient myth, these gods were benevolent. They taught humans all the knowledge their squishy human brains could handle. Architecture, engineering, astrology, magic. The humans learned everything. The Lord of Heaven's son, Hwanung, transformed himself into a mortal man. Then he married a woman who gave birth to Dangun. Dangun became the first human prince in all the land. He founded the kingdom of Gojoseon in approximately 2333 BC. The part I don't know, that nobody knows, is where the legend ends and true history begins. The kingdom of Gojoseon was very real. It is recorded in some of the most ancient Korean texts, known as the Samguk Kyusa. To this day, Koreans annually celebrate Dangun's history. The celebration is called the Day the Sky Opened. English people just call it National Foundation Day. It's officially a celebration of Hwanung's descent from heaven to earth, which supposedly happened on October 3rd, 2457 BC. Koreans don't just see this as an ancient festival that continues into the modern age, like so many people view Christmas or Easter. They really celebrate the exact day that it's believed their entire race came into existence. You thought this was just going to be a story about a Korean myth, but not quite. I have an archaeological site to show you that's going to blow your mind. Dangun lived for 1,908 years. He lived longer than anybody in the Bible, though not as long as the earliest Sumerian kings who lived up to 60,000 years. In the 1990s, North Korea claimed that they had discovered Dangun's burial place. They found the actual mausoleum where God's 2,000-year-old grandson was buried. The mausoleum is highly controversial. The North Korean government would not let any independent archaeologists access it. Nobody outside North Korea was allowed to examine or test anything from the site. The whole world had to take their word for it. What they supposedly found was a 72-foot-tall pyramid grave. If you don't believe me, here's a picture of it. North Korea restored the site in 1994, making the mausoleum look brand new. However, Dangun's bones have never been found. Do you think this is the real burial place of the ancient king? Let me know in the comments below. The Mystery of the Miniature Coffins. A series of seriously creepy tiny coffins were discovered almost 200 years ago in Scotland. To this day, nobody knows who made them, who left them in the cave, or if they were part of a diabolical black magic spell. They were found in June of 1836. A group of young boys were hunting for rabbits just outside the city of Edinburgh when they came upon a small and secluded cave tunneled into the rock. It was not an easy place to find, tucked behind some slabs of slate. If these boys hadn't been messing around, the tiny cave might still be hidden. Inside the dark cavern were 17 miniature coffins. These are real artifacts that you can see for yourself right now at the National Museum of Scotland. Out of everything in the museum, nothing captures the imagination quite like these coffins. The thing about them is that they were not empty. Each miniature coffin contained an intricately carved miniature figurine. There was a mini body in each mini sarcophagus. Each of the 17 tiny coffins was arranged neatly and organized. There were 3 tiers of them, 2 rows of 8 and 1 single coffin at the top. It was like a king looking down upon his peasants. But what could it mean? Each coffin is approximately 3.74 inches in length. Each coffin contained a small wooden figure carved and dressed in custom clothing. The clothing has been stitched and then glued onto the wooden figures. Here's a close-up image of them from the National Museum. Each figurine's fabric came from the 1830s, so none of the coffins had been in the cave for more than 6 years. Each figurine was also carved with their eyes open, like some creepy doll. On July 16, 1836, The Scotsman was the first newspaper to publish an article on the discovery. They called the mysterious cave a satanic spell manufactory. The newspaper suggested weird sisters lurking about the area, in possession of ancient power to cast deathly spells on their enemies by entombing their likeness. What the newspaper was trying to say was that witches may have put voodoo dolls in the cave. However, that was only one interpretation. Experts at the Museum of the Society of Antiquaries said the coffins were likely honorific burials. They were symbolic burials of men lost at sea who weren't able to have their real bodies buried. 80 years later, in 1906, The Scotsman published another article. This time, a local lady reached out to the newspaper with never-before-heard information. The mysterious lady claimed that her father had been visited at his business by a peculiar man. On one of the man's visits, he had drawn 3 small coffins on a piece of paper. It looked to be an absent doodle. Underneath each coffin, he wrote a date: 1837, 1838, and 1840. The woman went on to say that during those years, she lost her father and brother and other family members. She thinks maybe the man put a curse on her family. Another theory is that these are the leftovers of serial killers. Many people believe that there may be a link to the notorious killers Burke and Hare. and the burials were designed to represent the 17 victims. But that might not be true, since 12 of the people killed were female, and all of the corpses in the coffins were dressed as men. The most recent theory is that the dolls may be linked to the Radical War of 1820. During the war, workers went on strike calling for better conditions. The coffins may have been left as a way to see the movement rise again. Which theory do you like the most? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts about this creepy mystery. Do you believe the Greeks or the Egyptians sailed to the Amazon in ancient times? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks for watching! Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and come back soon. Bye!
Egyptians and the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon is one of the most famous natural wonders in the world. 6 million people visit it every year, and it is approximately 277 miles long and 18 miles wide at its thickest point. There are many nooks and crannies that haven't been fully explored yet. The Hopi Indians who lived in the region once believed the canyon was a gateway to the afterlife. And there are rumors that this magical place may very well have been the home of an underground civilization from across the planet. Explorers from the 1900s claim to have found evidence that suggests a group of ancient Egyptians were living in the Grand Canyon way before Europeans ever found North America. The shocking discovery goes back to 1909. The legendary Smithsonian Institution explorer G.E. Kincaid allegedly found a series of canyons during an expedition with anthropologist S.A. Jordan. The entrance to the cavern was nearly invisible and very hard to access, but they finally managed to squeeze themselves inside, at which point they discovered enormous caves filled to the brim with artifacts. These artifacts included statues, weapons, granaries still full of seeds, and countless other relics from an ancient civilization. The caves themselves were big enough for thousands of people to live inside, but the most astounding part was that the artifacts were clearly not Native American in design, but looked exactly like ancient Egyptian artifacts. But how did they wind up in the Grand Canyon? That's a mystery that has still never been solved. Nobody knows what happened to the alleged artifacts, and the Smithsonian denies every aspect of the story, and it's been argued that both Kincaid and Jordan were wiped from the records. Some believe this is a massive cover-up to maintain the status quo of human history. But if this was all true, it means that ancient Egyptians could have managed to arrive to the Americas and perhaps lived here amongst the native people. This would add to the list of rumors that ancient people arrived to the Americas thousands of years ago, such as the Chinese and the Sumerians. But of course, it has been impossible to prove if this could actually be true or if this is just speculation. For many, the Grand Canyon is the perfect place to hide a secret passage to another dimension, or even to a secret reptilian underworld. Rupak. The archaeological site of Rupak Marca Culpi is known more simply as the Machu Picchu of Lima. Just like Machu Picchu, this place was built at the very top of a mountain with a panoramic view for hundreds of miles in the distance. And yet it wasn't created by the Inca. It was instead a settlement associated with the Atavillos culture. What makes it so incredible is that if it were in better condition, it would be just as mystifying as Machu Picchu. Yet because of its bad state of decay, very few people even know it exists. Los Atavillos culture emerged after the collapse of the Wadi Empire, sometime around the year 1100, and began to establish permanent settlements throughout the Lima Valley. One of these was on the summit of Rupak Hill. That's at an elevation of roughly 10,000 feet above sea level. Just like Machu Picchu, the main activity here was related to worship. At least it was at the start. Funerary rites were performed on the hill, with the larger complex facilitating everything that went on with the ceremonies. But between 1470 and 1533, Los Atavillos were attacked by the Inca and changed Rupak to more of an administrative hub. Nonetheless, that didn't stop the Inca from absorbing the Atavillos into their empire, leading to the abandonment of Rupak. The Serpent Mound. The largest surviving effigy mound in the world is located in southern Ohio. It's called the Serpent Mound, and it's the biggest lump of earth anywhere on Earth shaped like an animal. It's over 1,348 feet long, built by the Native Americans roughly 2,000 years ago. It was discovered in the late 1800s and excavated several times since, but its origins are still a mystery. Some believe it was made in the year 300 BC. As you may have guessed by the name, Serpent Mound looks just like an enormous serpent. It looks like a snake with its head pointed east and its tail pointed west, curled in a spiral. Between the head and the tail are 7 winding coils. In total, with the coils straightened, the snake stretches a quarter of a mile long, and at some places is nearly 25 feet in width. The snake itself is overlooking Ohio Brush Creek, less than 80 miles from Cincinnati. And what makes it even more mysterious is that it's directly on the place where a meteor impacted the planet 300 million years ago. As of right now, experts have no clue what the mound represents. It was obviously made to look like a snake, but whether it was for spiritual purposes, if it had something to do with the comet crater, or if it was more to do with astronomy and the solstices, experts can't seem to agree. Lost Roman City. Archaeologists were shocked when they discovered the ancient city of Neapolis after a devastating storm. This storm swept through the Mediterranean and revealed stones on the seafloor off the coast of Tunisia. This isn't that well known of an ancient city, especially since it's been submerged for centuries, but it was known to archaeologists as a thriving port of entry to North Africa. Neapolis was originally founded by Julius Caesar before his war against Pompey, also known as the Third Mithridatic War and the prelude to Caesar's civil war. But far more interesting, perhaps, than the city itself is how it ended up underwater. Researchers believe it happened in the 4th century AD, when a tsunami struck the port city and literally sucked it into the sea. It was like a giant sandcastle sitting on the beach, and high tide came in, washing it away and leaving no trace behind. And this wasn't a small settlement by any means. Investigators used drone imagery and radar technology to completely map the old Roman city. It had complex suburbs, streets, and industrial zones. This was a very big metropolis, and it was wiped off the face of the earth by a sudden, unexpected natural disaster. Do you think it's possible that there are other lost cities that can be found along the coast? Could this happen to any current coastal cities? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Maya City Citadel. Scientists recently discovered a secret neighborhood in one of the largest Maya cities of all time. I am talking about Tikal, located in what is today Guatemala. It was one of the biggest and most important settlements in the ancient Maya Empire. It reached its peak between 200 and 900 AD, with a maximum of around 90,000 residents. In modern times, Tikal is hidden in dense jungle foliage. It's been difficult for researchers to fully comprehend the scope of the city, but using new LiDAR scanning equipment, they have found a new neighborhood. More shocking is the fact that the ruins inside this secret neighborhood are almost identical in style to buildings found in the ancient city of Teotihuacan. Teotihuacan is the ancient metropolis in modern Mexico that was built by a mysterious civilization who came centuries before the Aztec. This discovery has led to a lot of questions. Researchers don't know why a neighborhood in Guatemala from over 1,000 years ago looks almost identical to a neighborhood from a city in Mexico, thought to be roughly 1,500 years old. According to Brown University anthropologist Stephen Houston, the neighborhood is direct evidence of interactions between Tikal and Teotihuacan. It may even have been a sort of primitive embassy set up in the Mayan city. But how they met each other and what their business together may have been is still a total mystery. The Temple of Hercules. Archaeologists with the University of Sevilla in Spain believe they may have just found the infamous lost Temple of Hercules. They found archaeological evidence that the area between Chiclana de la Frontera and San Fernando in Andalusia was once an ancient coastline much more accessible than it is today. They have uncovered the remains of a massive building almost 1,000 feet long and 500 feet wide. What's truly incredible is that the structure is only visible at low tide, confirming that when it was built, the area would have been significantly higher above sea level. Researchers then used light detection and ranging techniques to see the outline of the submerged structure. While they don't know 100% what it is, it seems to fit perfectly with the historical accounts of the Temple of Hercules. The temple was a pilgrimage site thousands of years ago, visited as recently as during the Roman Empire by Julius Caesar. But somewhere along the line, the temple vanished into obscurity. Descriptions of the temple have it being somewhere in southern Spain, and being so huge and impressive that it shocked and dazzled any who beheld it with their own eyes. It could very well be that a flood or earthquake caused the temple to be submerged, leaving nothing behind for modern archaeologists except a vague outline and some broken stones. Stone Heap of the Wildcat. Rujum el-Hiri translates to English as Stone Heap of the Wildcat. This is the name of a huge megalithic monument in Israel, in the occupied region of the Golan Heights. It's hard to say exactly when this mysterious stone circle was made. By dating sediment samples and studying discarded shards of pottery, archaeologists believe it was sometime between 3800 and 2700 BC. It's been very hard to get an approximate date. The site itself consists of half circles surrounding a central mound. It took at least 40,000 tons of volcanic material stacked over 6 feet high to create these circles. The one part that's been dated correctly is the mound in the center. It was added between 1,000 and 2,000 years after the outer circles were originally put down. The mound was made around 1500 BC and once stood 12 feet high. Today, everything here is flat. This place has been worn down by time, and unfortunately, archaeologists can't agree on what it was ever used for. It could have been used by the ancient Zoroastrians for astronomical observations. It could have been a burial site, though no bodies have been found, or it may have been used as a calendar. And it could have been employed in funerary rites to help the dead reach the underworld, or maybe everything at once. The Giganta Temples. The megaliths found at the Giganta Temples in Malta are some of the biggest of the ancient world, exceeding over 15 feet long and weighing over 50 tons each. For centuries, the locals believed these temples were constructed by giants. In fact, the local legend about how these temples were made involves a giant and some beans. The story says that a giantess who feasted on nothing but broad beans and honey had a child with an ordinary, non-giant man. Related to motherhood and the feminine, it is believed the temples were possibly the site of an Earth Mother goddess fertility cult. 5,600 years ago, these temples were used in ceremonial fertility rites. At least that's based on the figurines, statues, and other offerings archaeologists have excavated from the site. The temples themselves are still in very good condition despite their age. This is impressive considering they date back to around 3600 BC. That makes the Giganta Temples some of the oldest freestanding monuments anywhere, even older than Stonehenge and the Pyramids of Giza. Have you ever been to Malta? Let me know in the comments below. Tintagel Castle. Nobody really knows the whole story of Tintagel Castle in the UK. There is very little of the ruins still standing, not much more than a crumbling stone entrance and the hint of walls rising up from the Great Sea cliffs. Some say it may have been an Iron Age fortress. Others think it could have been constructed by the Romans 2,000 years ago. The Romans definitely did use it for a while, since archaeologists have found signposts along major roads and old coins in the dirt from the 4th century. However, when it was built and its purpose are lost to history. It may have been nothing more than a fancy residence for a local magnate or a formidable shelter for the entire community. Regardless of where it came from, the castle was used well into the Dark Ages. Archaeologists have discovered pottery shards from as far away as Greece, Turkey, and North Africa. Whoever occupied this castle during the 5th century AD was trading with the Eastern Roman Empire. Then, in the 6th century, the castle appears to have been used as the court of King Mark of Cornwall. Shortly after, in 709, the failed kingdom of Dumnonia collapsed, and the site was abandoned. It wasn't reoccupied again for nearly 1,000 years, until Richard, Earl of Cornwall, reoccupied it in 1233. The history of the castle from here is well documented. It exchanged hands multiple times during the 1300s, but then it started to drift into a ruin in the 15th century. It was manned briefly in 1580 to guard against the Spanish, and then was left alone. The Gratos of Meishan. The Meishan grottos are a series of 194 caves cut directly into the side of a cliff in China. This place is arguably the most captivating example of rock-cut architecture in the entire country, complete with over 7,200 sculptures. It's made all the more impressive considering construction began just shy of 2,000 years ago in the later Qin era, circa 384 AD. The caves weren't explored in modern times until 1952 by a team of archaeologists from Beijing. They discovered much about this mysterious place's history. Because of its location along an old route connecting east and west, the cliff grottos would have overlooked traders moving goods from China's far east all the way to the southern tip of India. It was a crossroads where people from the Indian subcontinent and other parts of Asia moved freely. It also connected to the Silk Road, meaning there was lots of traffic moving into Central Asia and beyond to the Middle East. But why carve a bunch of caves into the side of a cliff? Researchers believe cave shrines in China were used to either worship one's ancestors or the natural deities. But when Buddhism came to China, bringing along the ancient trade roads, the shrines became a staple in Chinese religious architecture. In the 6th century, Buddhism exploded in China. The caves, which had been carved hundreds of years earlier, were slowly converted into sanctuaries for Buddhist monks. There was once a community here of over 300 monks living and worshipping in the grottos. Thanks for watching! Have you ever visited any of these ancient sites? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye!